Jordan. Thanks for joining us. Waiting for Eli to jump on here. Hello, friends. So good to see you. We got Vicky, we got Jen, we got Jordan, we got Zanara. Hey guys, miss you. Cool, we got Gina. Got some other friends on the line here. Just waiting for Eli to get on this live with us here. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Music's got a little bit of a different vibe this week. Reminiscent of our younger days, or really just the last time I was at a basement show. It's not that long ago. It feels like 2 years, 4 years ago. It's been about a year. Darn, having some tech issues here. There we go.
What's up?
You got music playing or no?
Oh, yeah.
We're playing the same band from 2 different parts of our house. Because we're nerds. All right, we'll wait for just a few more folks to join. Hello, Dundee. Thanks for being on with us. Oh, we got Evan on the line. I know Evan digs this music.
We have to play it through the whole B-side of the EP. It's not very long.
I don't think we really have time for that, given our time constraints.
Okay.
We should probably get started here. Yeah.
I'll do a fade out here. Hold on.
All right.
We'll do the last part.
Yes. All right. That is exactly the start we needed. Yes. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Shred Radio. This is our 7th episode. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of a different musical intro there this time around. And today, this is an extension of our kind of pre-launch stuff. We've been taking some time to lead up to our website launch, which is happening very soon, announcement coming soon. But we've just been chatting with each other about why we're building Shred, all the processes that have led us to decide to invest in this project, and everything that we hope it will become. And like we always say, Shred really kind of emerged from a bunch of conversations that made us feel really alive, especially as the pandemic was setting in, things that were making us feel curious and hopeful whenever there was a lot to be kind of afraid of and maybe a desire to isolate. We were really lucky to find ourselves with a lot of amazing people to talk to, and Shred came out of those conversations. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I know some folks have joined us several weeks in a row now, and it means so much. This has been really fun. Again, everything about Shred is pretty emergent, so even a lot of exciting stuff, even new content has come from these Shred Radio pieces, and I can't wait to start interviewing our contributors soon. We've got some really great folks on the line that I can't wait to be in conversation with. We're so happy you're here in this universe with us, and thanks for taking some time to talk with us tonight. Today we're going to be talking with Eli Namay. And Eli is Shred's publisher and kind of the head of the octopus. So he holds all the threads, he herds all the cats, he coordinates most of what we do as a steering committee. And in the rest of his world, he's an upright bassist, a composer, a writer, an organizer, and an educator. And during his time in Chicago, which is, the bulk of our adult lives, we were there, he was and continues to be part of the creative music, DIY, and folk music communities, among many other things. He curates concert series, and he works mostly as a music educator. And he's also an organizer with the DSA, and previously worked as a community organizer with Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation. I know Ab's on the call. Hello, Ab. We love you. He's also recently started organizing with UMAW, which stands for United Musicians and Allied Workers, and we'll talk a little bit about why he's doing that work and why it's so relevant to what we're doing here with Shred. And yeah, overall, over the past year, really since the quarantine started, Eli has really dug into all of the work to make Shred happen. A little background about how I know Eli. We met 12 and a half years ago on a bright, sunny August day in Chicago in Grant Park. And we were both little freshmen at Columbia College. Eli had just moved to Chicago from West Virginia, and I had just moved there from Pittsburgh. And we kind of just started talking shit about some music that was playing, and then we quickly started to relate around our love of Wu-Tang Clan and Napalm Death, very specifically. And long story short, now we're married. We told the state how much we like each other and stuff, and that's cool. And we've been collaborating on a pretty sick relationship. So that's how I kind of view what we do. We are collaborative life partners. And it's been really exciting to see how we work together in the context of Shred. It's definitely been an adventure and something that I've been really happy to do because I love working in person with people. And when you're in person with one other person in quarantine, it's nice to have a project. So, I could say a ton about what it's been like to witness your journey and trying to make sense of what it means to be conscious, to have the ability to reflect, to be an artist, and your journey of trying to make sense of those ideas that might seem a little bit abstract, but are actually super essential to orienting ourselves and what it means to be a human being in this time and place. But I'll leave that for the interview. I'm sure we'll get into that. What I mostly want to say up front is that I really appreciate your ethics. Even if they stress you out. You remind me so much of the character Chidi from A Good Place. I don't know if folks have watched that, but you have a stomach ache because you're trying to be the best you can be. And I just really value
Literally
that.
True.
Yeah, currently. But yeah, you don't take any shortcuts. You really hold yourself to a very high standard. And it's not that, you think you're always right and infallible, but just that you do your own work. And I can always trust that, if you make a decision, it's, at least in your perspective, an ethical decision. And so you've really kind of treated Shred as an organization from the very beginning, and as an organizing apparatus with accountability mechanisms and democratic processes. And you've led the charge in building a really strong and flexible structure for us to grow in and to invite other people into. And these ideas that we're talking about can be really slippery. Like sometimes they're too slippery for me. Like I've been listening to you and talking with you about this for 10 years and I'm still like sometimes like, wait, how does this all relate? But you can always bring it back, and that's where your education skills come in. Like you're such a dedicated educator and teacher, and I can really just feel that you want people to grasp this stuff so that we can have broader conversations with each other and strengthen these analysis and kind of make sure that there's really good exchange happening. And also, you're just really funny. Like, I really hope that you get to be funny in the context of Shred. I know you're holding a lot of responsibility, but I get to see like your ongoing act that is hilarious throughout your life, and yeah, you bring me a lot of laughter and others too. So anyway, we'll wrap it up with a love fest here.
I appreciate you. Wow, you just got bathed in all kinds of stuff there.
That's my favorite part of the show, is when I get to just fangirl for 10 minutes about whoever I'm talking to.
You're just letting the Leo shine, you know? Yes,
I'm the cheerleader. I love it. We've got Nijmi on. We've got Klinkman. So many beautiful friends. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Here at Shred Magazine, we do like to take our nervous systems into account. They do so much for us. They help us to figure out who we are and how we relate. We like to try to bring a little bit of calm before we start into anything big and communicative. So if you'd like to join us, it's all invitational, but just go ahead and take a moment and do a long exhale. And anytime you lengthen your exhale and make it a little shorter than your inhale, your heart rate has a chance to slow down. If you'd like, you can take a look around the room. Just let your animal self take in your surroundings. Remind yourself that you're safe enough. If you're home, if you're out, just recognize the safety around you. And I'm going to have a drink of water because hydration is key. And we do this work for a lot of different reasons, but primarily because when we're calm, it's a little easier to be curious. It's much easier to connect and literally hear each other. Our ears do a thing whenever we're stressed where we like lose the ability to hear details of the human voice. And also, when you feel calm, it's a little bit safer to disagree with each other. So we might hit points in any of our conversations where we hear something that doesn't sit well with us, or we feel like a projection is happening. And if we think about, the relevance of how safe we can feel in those disagreements and equate that to how safe we need to feel and how much we need to trust each other to actually win the world we deserve, it's just a good practice to try to bring a little calm to the sitch. We also like to make Shred feel a little bit like a party when it can. So Eli, what are you doing to feel like this is a party right now?
Well, I just listened to the B-side of this very sick Slices EP on my record player here, and it was really awesome. Every time I listen to that B-side, those two tracks off of it, it just makes my heart sing. So I love that. So I'm doing that right now.
Nice. I am wearing my Slices shirt, same band. And this is a band that I, in high school, spent a lot of time watching play shows in bars that I was too young to be in, probably. But another band that Eli and I really, learned to love together and have a lot of fun memories around. So it's always a party when Slices is playing. I'm also drinking some red wine this time around. Cool. Well, let's just dive right in. Tell me a little bit about what 2020 was like for you.
Well, of course, we moved to Pittsburgh from Chicago after 12 years or so in Chicago, and that was a big thing. When I got there, I was really gearing up to just extend the awesome creative music community that I was a part of in Chicago to Pittsburgh, and I was looking forward to going back and forth a bunch and playing shows and traveling around that kind of like little East Coast area, down to my hometown in Charleston, West Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. And I was really excited to do that, and I was gearing up to do it. You know, had some stuff lined up at the University of Pittsburgh, some people I met there. We were going to have some series going. It was going to be awesome. And then the pandemic happened. So that kind of, you know, shut down all of this in-person cultural activity. You know, and it was kind of a surreal experience, of course, for everybody. But, you know, thankfully we had a stable place, you know, staying with your dad. And at that point, you know, it was just kind of like a lot of these philosophical ideas that we've been talking about, these political ideas that had been brewing. You know, there was all of a sudden the space, but also the agitation to be like, all right, you know, there's this crisis that's come upon us right now. It's throwing the, you know, it's an ecological crisis, but it's also throwing the whole system into crisis. We need to think about it. So, you know, I think the first thing was just kind of reconnecting with people and being like, all right, I'm here. Let me see what's going on with Jack. Let me see what's going on with, you know, so-and-so, with Jess, with whoever, you know, and started with Jack and I just doing a lot of like reading, you know, and just, you know, working through some text together. And, you know, so that was a big part of 2020. And then, you know, here we are, and it just kind of bloomed into shreds. So a lot of that has been taken up with that. Of course, you mentioned the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, UMAW. That's a new formation that has happened in 2020 that I've been sinking a good bit of time into as well. So, yeah.
Cool. And what did you have any like personal breakthroughs within 2020 around like how you were relating to your work and to music? Like, what did it feel like to have those gigs lined up and then not be able to do them?
Well, it made me realize, it really hit home that we got to organize, right? You know, we're seeing a lot of individual solutions to the crisis of that's hit the cultural industry right now, and it just drove home a thing that I always knew, that we had to organize. We have to organize in the world of you know, being cultural workers. You know, so it really just drove that point home for me.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, and I should add one other thing with that. You know, I think that I tend to go through these cycles of, you know, almost these, the word that's coming to my head is these kind of come to Jesus moments where it's just like, you know, excuse the cliche, but, you know, of like, what is it that really needs to be done? What is the authentic thing that is to be done? It's not only going to help, you know, you, but it's going to help try to help everybody. So again, you know, that's kind of how we came together with Shred. That was really inspiring. And also, you know, seeing these formations that are popping up, like the UMAW and the Workers' Arts Project is another one that's popping up, trying to say like, okay, capitalism is putting a crunch on us. This class society is putting a crunch on cultural activity, just like all other forms of care, you know, and we'll get into culture as care in a bit, I'm sure. But it's putting a crunch on that, and how do we organize in such a way that we create the conditions so that everybody has the space to practice culture and to have a thriving, healthy cultural life, along with, you know, just a healthy, basic physical life. I mean, the two are related. It's the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And have you performed or done any in-person music or anything else throughout 2020 and into 2021, like in person?
Well, not since the pandemic. You know, I did a little tour right at the beginning of 2020 and played some solo sets, and played with back in Chicago with Giraffe, this band that is a great crew of friends from the Chicago DIY and creative music world. You know, we played a couple gigs at the beginning of 2020, but other than that, I have not. Other than with a new friend that I hope to work more with in the future, Mark Michelli. He's a guy I was referencing from University of Pittsburgh, you know, and I hope to work more with him in the future. But we had just like a jam session, and we just like had a little session out
in the driveway,
in the driveway at your dad's house. So that was it. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have been kind of like recording across the internet, right? Like you've been recording your pieces and making stuff with folks digitally.
Yeah, digitally, not, Giraffe, we've been trading some tracks back and forth, and, obviously we've been doing all this work online with Shred, and, this is a time where it's like I'm kind of looking at it as a good reset time to, like, think about my own practice and go back and revisit some stuff, at least, like, musically, thankfully, have the a little bit of time and space to be doing that, and, yeah, so.
Well, Monica says, thanks for being responsible during a pandemic.
Trying to be, we're seeing some irresponsible stuff out there, and it's like, I get it. People have to work. This is a really tough situation. It's a catch-22 that people are in right now. But we got to be clear on what the right thing to do under these circumstances are. So I hope that we can organize towards realizing, what the right thing to do is under a situation like this.
Definitely. All right, so let's zoom out and look at how you came to this moment and how you came to the work that you do now, which is obviously a wide variety. What's your origin story? Where are you from? What do you do?
Well, I'm from a Lebanese Syrian immigrant community in Charleston, West Virginia. And it is it was a really interesting place to grow up. My grandfather, who on my dad's side, who died when he was real young, when my dad was real young, was a kind of a community organizer of sorts, really doing a lot to ensure, at least within the Lebanese Syrian community, that there was a lot of stability and whatnot. My grandfather on my mom's side, had a lot of the same qualities, working in communities that he was in. I went to school for music in 2008. Thankfully had, folks that were supportive of that. And, in school, I had one idea of music going to school. And when I got to school, it was very much so like, okay, I'm going to really focus on this. I'm going to really do my best. I know this takes a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff, involved with making a musical life happen. And I was confronted with the sort of the limitations of a cultural education, of a musical education. And I didn't really quite have the words to articulate it at the time, but I was noticing the dynamics, the economic dynamics of the society creeping into the classroom, getting into mediating the social relations in the classroom. Saw a lot of notions of value ideas about value getting put forward that were just like, where's this coming from? This is very weird that all these value judgments are being made, and nobody seems to be reflecting on the fact that they're making them. So when I was I was launched into a very deep depression my second year of school, and in coming out of that, one thing I did was I was fortunately able to go to therapy, and that was a huge thing. And the second thing that there's a set of ideas that I encountered that was really helpful for this. So there's a group called the Research Group in Mind Science and Culture at Columbia College, Chicago. And, we took some classes from them that were really inspiring, thinking about what it means to be a self, the brain, what it means to have language, what is going on in society. And I also encountered the work of Karl Marx, and because I was thinking about the commodity form. I was like, the fact that things are happening on a market, money is mediating a lot of stuff. That's creeping into the classroom. Well, it turns out that Marx has a lot to say about that, of course. So from there, as you and I really got into trying to organize a bunch. We had a little encounter with an organization that some folks might have heard of called RevCom, the Revolutionary Communist Party. So, we were like, okay, we like Marx, we like communism. Let's, we like these ideas. Let's see what's up. But RevCom is just basically a cult of personality. I mean, around Bob Avakian, and so there's a lot of very heavy dogma there. Obviously, if you've encountered them, you know this. So that kind of launched me into a period of like reflection, and I spent a lot of time just trying to think, trying to reflect, and you know, exploring, you know, various ideas. I honestly, you know, got more into sort of a postmodern trajectory, and I think that this was heavily influenced by some of the people in the experimental music community that I was hanging out with. You know, this is sort of some of the in vogue thinkers, you know, that are in that world are more of a sort of post-Marxist, come from sort of a post-Marxist kind of, or post-structuralist kind of trajectory. You know, then you got involved a lot with, you know, a lot of prison and police abolitionist stuff. I, you know, got involved a little bit with that, but then, you know, at this point, it was like, okay, we're getting re-agitated. I need to do something. I eventually came back around to thinking about things from a pretty clearly socialist perspective. I came back around to Karl Marx via David Harvey and via Moïse Pastone. I don't know if Julia Draytel is on here right now, but her showing me Moïse Pastone was definitely like a huge, you know, just a mind-blowing thing for me, that helped me, you know, think about some of those ideas again. And yeah, and so, you know, found my organizing home with the DSA after a while, worked with Socialist Alternative for a while. I was a full-time organizer with Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation for a little bit, but you know, ultimately found my sort of organizing home with there and the Socialist Night School program. You know, and throughout this whole time, trying to grapple with these ideas and trying to think about really how language, there's this elephant in the room all the time of language. What is language? You know, isn't it weird that all of our structures seem to be amalgamations of symbols, you know, that we're relating to each other through these symbols. So, you know, that's what I've been trying to grapple with. And in these various organizing situations, it's always been like, how do I make this relevant? How is this like, how do we, you know, integrate this really concretely into our organizing practice and not just sit around and think about it all day, which I love to do, which is very, but it's not very, you know, useful politically at the end of the day, if that's all you're doing.
Right. Well, and just to name the fact that, like, you know, listening to you talk, it's like, how did this person have so much time to like trace all these threads? And I do want to name that, like, yes, you have had the privilege of, you know, being able to go to college and having your family and your community support, you know, this kind of exploratory spirit of yours. And also you did all this research like at 3 and 4 in the morning, coming home from gigs and reading, you know, driving back and forth to do your music lessons and then finding time to like learn this stuff. So I just want to, you know, again, reflect on the fact that I've gotten to watch you, you know, do all of this research and kind of like self-study for 10 years. And it has not been like a small feat. Like, you have really dug in, and just looking at the amount of like effort you've put into kind of compiling these ideas and investigating them and interrogating them. Another big reason, you know, why we want to make a magazine, because like just from Eli's perspective, there's so much to dig in. And then on top of that, there's people that we intersect with who have as much depth in research and of course in life experience and just being a human that is relating and coalescing around these ideas. And so that's why we're so excited to get folks in conversation and build containers. But yeah, just again, naming the fact that Eli is kind of the head of the octopus that Shred is, in part because he's dedicated a lot of time, you've dedicated a lot of time to this research that has, you know, led you down infinite rabbit holes that are all relevant and also a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And it is good to point out that, I mean, you know, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, I was materially able to do the things that I do precisely because of the social and economic, you know, situation that I find myself in. I'm fortunately privileged enough to have some resources to take the time to do this. I mean, you know, and we need to be clear about that from a materialist perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So that was your time leading up to 2020. We decided to move back to Pittsburgh to be closer to family. And then the pandemic hit. And that was just about a year ago. I think you were driving back from Chicago as Corona was landing. I was in California and San Francisco when the first case was announced in San Francisco. We were both kind of like racing to get back to Pittsburgh, and then the pandemic set in. And so one of the things you've been doing with your time, and it's basically been a full-time job for you, I would argue, since the pandemic started, and especially since we started organizing our core team, was to build Shred. You really have treated it like a full-time job. And like the rest of the steering committee, you were, well, obviously on board with this before we knew it was a magazine. And I don't even recall the moment that we realized it was a magazine, but you were dedicated to this project, whether it was going to be a pamphlet or a performance or, you know, an animation. But, you know, you've been dedicated since the very beginning. Why does it feel so important to you? And why did it feel so important to spend so much time on this year? Why does Shred need to happen right now?
Well, you know, it's funny. I remember the precise time that we did decide it needed to be a magazine was because for some reason, you know, I think maybe I saw a couple of people who were on here who were involved in this project, but you know, this DIY kind of music magazine called Cacophony Magazine came back up on our radar, and we were like, oh, that was cool. You know, that was a fun time exploring some ideas with that, you know. And we're like, yeah, let's just call it a magazine. It's a magazine, you know, because, you know, it's like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to do this, produce some multimedia stuff. We're trying to talk about ideas. And, you know, we're trying to be, I think, most importantly, an organizing apparatus and a political education apparatus, which political education equals organizing, I think, you know, if you're doing it right. So, you know, the question being like, why do I feel that it needs to be a magazine? Why have I spent so much time working on this? You know, again, I think that with this crisis that came, you know, being confronted with this crisis and being confronted with the just astounding inability of the capitalist mode of production of this class society to deal with it, to, you know, center the needs of human beings over abstractions, over, you know, abstract financial things, you know, that are in service, not just arbitrary abstractions, they're in service of a particular class, continuing to accumulate wealth. You know, being confronted with that in such a stark, I mean, just absurd. I mean, it's you couldn't make this up. This is an absurdist play that we're living. It's ridiculous. You know, yeah. This is a bad comedy that we're living in. So, you know, being confronted with that, it was like, all right, like, you know, we have to kind of put up or shut up. We have to, like, you know, it's that kind of reckoning, that moment of self-reflection of like, you know, if I put it all out there and really examine it, I know that I got to be authentic to what, you know, is what is important. And there's these ideas that we just kept getting confronted with over and over and over again, these philosophical issues, these big picture questions that we kept getting confronted over and over again, and really real material that had real material implications in these various organizing spaces that we're in. I mean, we were all over the place in Chicago, and you keep getting confronted with that over and over again, and you are in this crisis, and it's like, all right, we got to do something about it. We got to, like, try our best to organize in such a way that makes these bigger picture questions that are affecting everything, you know, really grounded. Build some tools. Build some toolkits, you know, to allow people, you know, to help contribute to the effort to navigating some of these things, taking some of these things into account. You know, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. And can you just talk a little bit about maybe like, I guess specifically reification and how that plays into organizing and cultural work? Like, you know, I think that's the one key thing that's kind of been a common thread throughout a lot of your work. And just briefly, like, that's a word that I know you didn't actually say it in what you just said, but it's a word I always expect to come up and a word that I think I find really useful. And that kind of describes part of what we're doing and just kind of brings into light the fact that, like, we're using language. Like, let's not forget that, like, we, in order to communicate, have to tell stories and have to essentially, the economy is essentially a shared myth that gets human beings to organize themselves and animates people to get up and go to work every day. And why, you know, what the theory is behind that and why it's so important to highlight when we're organizing.
Right, exactly. I've been obsessed with this the philosophical fallacy called reification. And what reification is when you mistake an abstraction, an abstract idea, for a thing in the world or for a process in the world. So, you know, from a Marxist perspective, Marxists talk about reification whenever they are talking about what the economy does, that it, you know, this is a reified economy. That is, these abstract money games, financial games, are made to be real, made to be as if it's real. Like, you know, we have to worry really about the health of the stock market over the health of people, right? So that's reification in that world. But it happens in a more general sense too, whenever we mistake, let's say, a math problem or a math equation for a physical process, for a physical phenomena. When we mistake a political ideology or a personal identity for ourselves, a personal identity for who we are as these, frankly, miraculous, complex, you know, beings that are you know, existing in this extremely astounding universe, you know. So that's what reification is, and it's something that like creeps into, I think, all aspects of our lives if we're not careful with it. If we don't reflect on the fact that we can reflect, if we don't reflect on what it is that we're doing right now, what is it that I'm doing right now? I'm using words, right? You hear the word, and then it projects a certain meaning internally. Pictures, maybe images are popping up to you. You know, you're trying to connect things in this sort of abstract virtual world. So, you know, what we're trying to say, and to quote the example from one of my favorite thinkers, Terence Deacon, we are animals, we are beings that enter into a dual world. We live in a tactile world of events, of processes, like every other animal. But we also inhabit a second world, a virtual world, and you know, that is made up of symbols, of metaphor, of meaning, of, you know, complex narrative, you know, games, all the rest of it. So, you know, that's central to this issue, is reflecting on that and taking that into account.
Yeah. And again, that's why we do integrate some care of our nervous systems at the beginning too, because a lot of these words, especially useful words we find useful, words we use to find each other, can be very emotionally, have a very different emotion, evoke a very different emotional response from person to person. If I say the word socialism to even, like, let's take, for example, my dad. If I would have said I'm a socialist to my dad 10 years ago, he would be like, that's dumb, and he would get defensive. And now he himself is like, hell yes, like he has gone through a transformation. So let's consider the emotional response we get, and like how to, because the right, like the example you always bring is the right is considering this really heavily and throwing a lot of money into the study of symbols, language, emotional responses, and the ruling class is very invested in us having negative emotional responses to things that would actually benefit us. And so that's what I'm really excited about to collaborate with you on, and a lot of other folks, is like really digging into like the emotional response we have to language and symbols, and how we can out-organize the right in terms of like even something as simple as like pro-life, and how many people vote for Republicans based strictly on this pro-life stance alone. And yet if you look at Republican budget priorities, that is an anti-life budget they consistently pass. And I'm not, of course the Democrats also are very anti-life, but even something as simple as that, really developing tools to investigate you know, heavy phrases like that, and figuring out new ways to find each other, and invoke feelings of trust, of hope, of you know, responsibility in each other.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, really what this is a trying to reflect on who we are, what we are. You know, and you know, exploring the depths of that. What are the limits of that understanding? You know, and that's like a bigger, maybe you might call it spiritual or philosophical kind of endeavor that is really important. And I'm to create a world where we can prioritize that, get over some of this bullshit that we're dealing with, and prioritize, be able to prioritize that type of exploration. But you know, the example of the right being that particular example of emotions. You know, we have these complex words, these this complex language, and that's also integrated with an older, you know, at least evolutionarily speaking, an older system of emotions and of feelings and all of that. And so the two are, there's just all these complex systems that are, you know, top to bottom, that are interacting. The right, you know, these fascists are very interested in how, you know, things make you feel, how words make you feel. You know, these right-wing strategists we hear about, like Roger Stone and Frank Luntz and stuff, they're extremely interested in thinking about what your emotional state is. We need to be serious about that on the left as well, you know, and doing it in such a way that is centered around care and not around manipulation, you know, because regardless of what you're doing in your organizing, you know, emotions are at play. Are we going to take that into account, or are we not?
Yeah. Yes, very exciting stuff. So I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit more about the philosophy you hope to work with within the context of Shred, and why, as a person who does everything you do, you're a performer, an organizer. Performer is even a funny word. We talked to Claire about that, but you're a musician, a creator, an organizer, an artist, a human, a person who likes to have fun, you know, a whole person. Why do you think it's important to get people engaged in these conversations? And specifically, why do you think care is the correct anchor for all of this?
Well, again, you know, if we want to build a better world, I think that we have to consider this stuff, you know, because these things are at play. You know, the dynamics of language, the dynamics of our emotions, these questions about, you know, stories about our origins and struggles over that, and how that's tied to ruling class ideology, or can be tied to ruling class ideology. That stuff's at play regardless of what we say about it, regardless of what we think about it, and regardless of if we choose to act on it or not. And I think that we, since it is at play, we need to take that into account. That is, if our goal is to, you know, build a world that is free from oppression, that is free from domination, that is free from exploitation, you know, of human beings with each other, human beings with the rest of the natural world. We got to take these things into account if we want to do that. You know, and I think that care is a great way to ground this, to anchor this, you know, as a guiding ethic. You know, are we talking about economic policies, or you know, ways of setting up our social or cultural spheres in a way that centers care? How that relates to art specifically, and the thing that I've come to, and you know, Claire had a lot of great things to say about this, you know, when she was on, is that, you know, why do we feel so driven to produce culture, to make art, to have ritual, to, you know, do all these things? It's a way of caring for ourselves. You know, it's a way of, you know, reproducing ourselves psychologically, emotionally, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a way to connect and understand the rest of the universe in a very sort of immediate, visceral kind of way. So, you know, I think centering care in all things is just extremely, extremely important. And it's just a very grounded guiding ethic. Like, is this thing going to lead to the most amount of care, or is this thing going to, you know, are we prioritizing some abstract, you know, shitty financial game over people getting the resources that they need, over getting health care, over getting, you know, things like this. And in a way, it takes a lot of things that seem like very complex problems, and there is a lot of complexity to it, and it makes it very simple. You know, it makes it very simple. You know, we are biological beings, and we have some pretty basic needs. You know, and care involves first of all, just getting those needs met, making sure that you're not drinking poisoned water, you know, and you have enough food to eat.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you could relate that back to like the work you do, like your paid work as a music teacher. Like, how does that care work? And how do you bring how do you anchor that with care?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that again, music, culture, ritual are forms of care. You know, why do we do these things? We do these things because they make us feel good. They are healing to us. They reproduce us psychologically, emotionally, and you know. And it's also a way of knowing yourself and of knowing, you know, the universe, how time passes by, you know, knowing how sound works, how your senses work. You know, you're learning something about yourself. And that's a form of care. So I think, like, in the lesson room, you know, that's something that should be centered, you know. And like I said, from my experience, I know this is a lot of people's experience at music schools, you know, or growing up taking lessons or stuff. All of this abstract, you know, stuff comes into the lesson room. These notions of value that are based on exchange, these notions of value that are based on whether or not the ruling class values the particular aesthetic that you're interested in doing or the particular musical activity that you're doing. You know, why is it more valuable, you know, some sort of piece of, I don't know, whatever, highly practiced, virtuosic, you know, whatever, and a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, you know, really having a great experience just sort of banging, you know, on the piano. Mm-hmm. What makes one more valuable than the other? You know, mm-hmm. Obviously there's a difference. One takes a lot of time and practice, and that's great. That's beautiful, cool, do it. I love spending a lot of time on my instrument and working things out and problem solving. But the two relate to each other, you know, and so in that center and care, again, we get a guiding ethic, where it's like, I'm not going to make abstract, it's a way of grounding things and making sure I'm not making abstract claims about value in the lesson room. I'm saying, that makes you feel good, you're interested in that, making that noise, please, let's go, you should do that. That's awesome, that's great, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and I would say, like, you know, I know a lot of music teachers, but I don't know how they relate to their practice as well as I know how you relate to yours. And like just hearing stories of you, you know, you would come home and tell me about like lessons you had with like teenagers who were having like questions about gender and like stuff that would come up in the music room that like typically, you know, I don't think most music teachers are primed to talk about that, but to you, it's like, why would you separate that from the rest of the human being? And of course, it's relevant to the kind of music they want to make or how they're relating to sound. So I feel like often educators, and maybe, you know, in your case at least, you were put in a position of holding space that you weren't necessarily like trained to hold, but almost like a therapeutic space. And you handled that responsibility really well. And I feel like it was also, that was also restoring for you. Like you felt valued and valuable in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this goes to the issue, this broader issue of siloization, mm-hmm. of atomizing of disciplines, you know, and of reductionist worldviews. When you enter into the lesson room, you're entering into a social relation. So, you know, the way that the economy is set up, the way that that kid is getting, you know, what they had to do, what their parents had to do in order to get the basic means of survival are in the lesson room with you. The ideology of the ruling class is in the lesson room with you. So mm-hmm. that's there whether I like it or not. You know, a lot of times, yeah, I would prefer to just totally purely explore space and time and not think about this bullshit. I would totally love to do that. But, you know, but the thing is that we have to think, at least I would like to, let me rephrase that. I would like to think, I mean, you always want to think about a bigger context, you know, and I think that's a beautiful thing. But the fact that the domination, the fact that we live under a class society that is highly exploitative, that is highly, you know, based highly on oppression, there's a lot of awful just ideologies, just oppressive, awful, you know, conditioning and baggage that people have that it manifests in mental and emotional ways. The fact that we got to deal with that in the lesson room, I'm like, I want to just explore space and time. Let's get over this. Let's have I want to get to the party, man. Come on, let's do this. You know, but the thing is it would be those dynamics are there whether I like it or not. So I should address them. You know, I should address them. And I think that what we're seeing is on the positive also. Anytime you enter into a lesson room or you engage in music, you know, there's all this great research about you know, what music does to us physiologically, you know, and there's some really great things that you can point to pretty directly and say, you know, this is how, you know, listening to this or that affects your nervous system or affects your cardiovascular system or whatever, and that's good for you, you know. Um, and that stuff is going on whether I like it or not, whether I acknowledge it or not. So, you know, we should be acknowledging all of the above. So that's the part of the piece of centering things on care of like, I want to have that, you know, we should have this type of training that is holistic, that is dialectical, where we can start to see the connections between all these different things and say, yeah, we're entering into a healing relationship, a therapeutic relationship, whether I like it or not. So I should be, you know, sensitive to that. I mean, I've done the best that I've, you know, that I could do with the tools that I've had, but we could imagine that if a society was really set up based on this, then we could really, everybody would have a really great, you know, could have really great therapeutic situations in their cultural practices.
Definitely, and I think something we'll get into with the more classical-oriented folks, and specifically with Patrick's podcast, Classical Trader, is about, on the opposite end of that, how prevalent abuse is in the lesson room, and how prevalent abuse is in even like what would be considered, of course, you know, like very, very stable careers, where, you know, there's abuse that manifests there. And also we're well aware of the abuse that manifests in our underground music scenes. We're constantly dealing with sexual assault and community accountability and people preying on younger people because of their social clout. So there's this essence of domination that kind of permeates, that we're working with separately, and I think the dots are coming together in a lot of ways, and we're hoping Shred can play a role in supporting that and coming up with tactics and strategies and at least a sense of solidarity with folks who are dedicated to undermining and undoing the dynamics that lead to abuse being accepted and in some cases expected in music education and in music in general. So on that note, what are you most looking forward to creating with Shred, aside from literally the entire thing? Because you are in every meeting that we ever have and hold all the pieces.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with everybody to, you know, to put the pieces together. You know, everybody's bringing a lot to the table, a lot of great ideas, thoughts, conversations. So yeah, I mean, I think the thing that, so I'm excited about everything. But I think one of the things, the activities that I'm really most excited about doing is doing some, you know, political education events and exploring some of those spaces. Because, again, I love the education space. I think it's a sacred space. You know, and in the DSA in Chicago, I was fortunate enough to work with them on the Socialist Night School stuff, and as that was getting developed, you know, in some of its earlier stages, and I saw that grow and grow and grow and be a really awesome, like, entry point for people into the organization and be a really great, you know, organizing tool, and just, you know, the type of, like, group collective energy that would come out of some of those conversations and some of those sessions was just so amazing. So I'm really excited to dig into some of these broader topics that are, you know, equally as you know, relevant to organizing work, and having some sessions around that. So I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about doing, you know, aside from the thing as a whole.
The thing as a whole, yeah. So the political education is really huge for you. Mm-hmm. Cool. And can you talk a little bit about, you know, not into too much detail, but like how we hope to not only have that be a space that Shred holds, but how we hope to develop curriculum that we can, like, kind of share with folks and people can engage with and kind of edit to make best use of for themselves?
Yeah. So, you know, we're trying to approach it from putting together, you know, various curricula around all these ideas and more that we've been talking about tonight, and, you know, I think the rollout plan is gonna be, we're gonna have some sessions, we're gonna test some things out, see how they go, and then from there start posting all these things on the website so they can be available to anybody who wants to check them out. And also, I think as an organizing goal, we want to be in conversation with various organizations, with various organizers, people who are interested in this stuff, organizers, political groups, cultural groups, cultural educators, whoever.
Scientists.
If you got scientists, if you got people in a room, or if you want to talk about how to work on this stuff and bring some more, of politics and culture into your science, or any number of those combinations of things, then we should talk, and we want to make that available to everybody, and actively seek out relationships with people who are trying to do these sessions, and hopefully get some sessions running as many sessions as we can with as many people as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think another thing that we've been taking more seriously by necessity is, of course, doing this at a sustainable pace. And especially for you, Eli, being the one holding, all of the threads together. I really appreciate your approach recently to trying to slow down and make sure that we can do what really matters, in a sustainable way. And as many tentacles as this project could have, and already does have, or I could even say like roots and branches or whatever, I think the core foundations are really wonderful, and we've been working really hard to make sure that those pillars are very strong and that we can refer back to them whenever we're trying to figure out how to make decisions. So yeah, I just want to lift that up, that, this feels urgent, and also, this is important, so speed up, this is important, so slow down, and we're trying to calibrate along that spectrum. So again, that's why I appreciate your ethics and your dedication to making sure, you're showing your work, because, this is the kind of thing that feels really important. And I feel like every time we have so often we in our committee meetings are like, oh, I was having this conversation with a friend and it relates so much to shred. And it's like, that's what we're trying to do is shred. And it's like, this is such a big project. And also it really comes down to this very core piece of like, we just want to be able to take care of each other. It's very simple. Like so very excited to cultivate relationships around that shared goal. And I think we have a flexible enough container that can look like a lot of different things. So I really appreciate that. What are you doing?
Yes, I appreciate that as well, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, buddy. What are you doing what are you doing to take care this winter to close out?
I'm trying to, with as busy as all this stuff gets, I'm trying to just take time for music and for practicing and whatnot, playing, just creating, improvising with myself, even if it's just with myself. Or we've been jamming a lot. That's been super fun. We got this super dope ride cymbal. We got a new ride cymbal. It's fucking sick. It's a Meinl, the Big Apple 24-inch dark ride. It's such a cool cymbal.
We can have a cymbal as a treat.
You can have a cymbal as a treat, yeah. So yeah, thankful to be able to have the resources to have that fun cymbal. And, yeah, I think that's it. And then watching some documentaries, that's fun. Trying to honor my sleep schedule, my natural tendency to stay up just ridiculously late, and just honor that and be like, that's cool, that's valid, do that.
And also sleep enough.
Don't feel bad about it. And
Yeah.
sleep enough at the same time, yeah, so.
Yeah. Wonderful. And I have to always give you a shout out for literally cooking basically every meal I eat. So thanks for keeping me fed. That's how you care for me.
You've been cooking. You've been cooking a lot more recently. We've just.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting there. All right, folks. Shred-mag.com. You can find us online. Right now, shred-mag.com is where you can find our kind of mission, vision, values kind of stuff, kind of an outline of what we're trying to do. You can also take a look at the people tab there and see everybody who's involved with the project so far. And also, if you have an idea that you want to pitch, or just a collaboration, or just to get you know, on our list of folks that might be interested in collaborating, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom and fill out the interest form there, and that will let us know that you might be down to work with us at some point in the future. We've got a lot of great collaborations coming down the pipe, cool podcasts, events, some of our foundational material. We've got art on the burner here. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, here on Instagram, give us a like. You've already found us here, so if you haven't liked us already, go ahead and do that. We're going to keep rolling with the Shred Radio series. I think next week Eli's going to interview me, actually. And now that I've interviewed everyone else, I'm going to get to be on the mic and talk a little bit about why I have built Shred over the past year. If you want to fund this work a little bit, if you've got a little bit of money or a lot of money that you want to throw at us, you can become a patron, patreon.com/shredmagazine. Everything from the $3 level up to the $100 a month level. We've got presents for you. I will hand make you a necklace if you want to give us $10 a month. And that money goes towards, you know, this is something that, you know, we have been doing as a labor of love and necessity and care, but we would like to pay our contributors, pay our artists, and at some point, you know, maybe have some kind of way to sustain ourselves in this work. Part of that is just getting up some basic funds to pay for stuff like our contributors and our website. And for folks that don't want to be paid for their art, we do try to donate money to a mutual aid fund of their choice as well. And I think that's it. Join us next weekend. Stay tuned for our launch date announcement. That's coming up soon. Please hit us up if you'd like to collaborate. And anything else you'd like to say, Eli?
I think that's it. Just that, yeah, if you've hit us up and we haven't gotten back to you, just be patient. There's a lot going on. We love you, and we will get to you soon. Yeah. All right. Much love, everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay cozy. Oh, and by the way, there is a polar vortex in Chicago. I'm sure a lot of you are centered there. Please find a way to help houseless folks out if you can. There are a few mutual aid fundraisers. We've shared a few on our Instagram page here. Let's try to get folks sheltered just so that we can be in solidarity with and keep folks alive who should not be unsheltered in this goddamn country. So solidarity with our houseless siblings here, and much love. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.